Welcome, dear students, to the grammar lesson on the topic active passive voice. Towards the end of the lesson, you will be able to define passive voice, distinguish between active and passive voice, list the rules for converting active to passive voice, differentiate between transitive and intransitive verbs, identify sentences as active or passive. Children, what's voice in grammar? It's nothing but the term used to describe whether a verb is active or passive. In other words, when the subject of the verb is doing the action of the verb, for example, the dog bit the postman, the verb is said to be in the active voice. When the subject of the verb is being acted upon, for example, the postman was bitten, the verb is said to be in the passive voice. So, the voice of verb tells us whether the subject is acting or being acted upon. So, when we speak to someone, we normally use active voice. For example, I cleaned my room today. Now, let's consider this example. You want the focus to be on the room and not yourself or the person speaking. So, technically, a person is the subject and a room is the object. But now, you want to focus on the object and not the subject. That's when the passive voice comes into picture. So, this sentence can be written or spoken in the passive voice as the room was cleaned today by me. So, you see, in active voice, your subject is important, while in the passive voice, your object becomes important. And what all do we do to change active voice to passive voice? Look at the screen. The object is made subject. They switch positions. Your verb becomes passive. For example, cleaned became was cleaned, and the past participle or third form of the verb is used in passive voice. We also add by before the passive subject, which is now the object in the passive voice sentence. To understand why we need the passive voice, we first need to study these examples. So let's pay attention. Now, if I say the cameras are watching you, it doesn't make much sense to you to say this. Instead, if I say you are being watched, it conveys the message in a better way. And if I say the guard will close the office at 10 p.m., it is not important who closes the office. The important information is the closing of the office. Hence, it is better to say the office will be closed at 10 p.m. In the third example, if I say someone built this house 100 years ago, well, anyway, it is not known who built it, so there's no point mentioning it. You can simply say this house was built 100 years ago. I have more examples for you, like I was born on 26 January 1950. Many people were injured in flood that ruined the entire village. My grandfather was admitted to hospital yesterday. The movie was released in 1990. Students, you notice all the verbs in bold and italic are in passive voice. And we now understand that we need passive voice so that we can convey our message better and convey significant information so that we can hide subject since it's either insignificant or too obvious, and also that we can break monotony of using sentences in active voice and make our language more interesting by using passive voice. Now, look at this example on your screens. All the verbs in italic, underlined and highlighted, are your passive verbs. Notice the formula they use. Form of be plus past participle or third form of the verb. Was, has been, is being are all forms of be. And hit, injured, given, taken are all the third forms or past participles of the base verbs hit, injure, give, take, respectively. Now, let's take a look into how our pronouns change from object pronoun in the active voice to subject pronoun in the passive voice. Say, for instance, take the first example. He hit me with his car. So, me is the object in the active voice. So, we call it an object pronoun because it replaces the object. And I was hit by his car. I is your subject pronoun in the passive voice. So, you see how your pronouns change from active to passive. Me becomes I, you remains the same, her becomes she, him becomes he, it again remains the same, us becomes we, them becomes they. I have a few more examples for you. Please read them carefully. You see, we are going to watch a movie tonight. We, as a subject in an active voice sentence, changes to us as an object in a passive voice sentence, and so on and so forth. Students, we shall now look at the structures across tense and modals while converting an active voice sentence to a passive voice sentence. Please focus your attention on your screens now. For instance, we have the first tense, which is the simple present tense. Notice the structure here. You have the auxiliary verbs or the helping verbs in simple present tense forms as am, is, are, plus past participle of the main verb as your sentence structure when converting into passive voice. Look at the example, you'll understand it clearly there. He eats chocolates in active voice. Chocolates are eaten by him in passive voice. Likewise, take a note of the rest of the tenses and their structures. You shall keep in mind all of these when writing a sentence in passive voice. Your basic formula remains unchanged, which is form of be plus past participle or V3. Children, please note that you will not change the tense itself. For instance, students usually make mistakes of changing a present tense to a past tense. No, you shall not do that. It is the structure that changes. Now, look at the modals, which says present slash future modals. You would notice the structure as modal plus be plus past participle. So, for instance, the first sentence, Rami may not drink the milk, changes to milk may not be drunk by Rami. In the past passive form, we have modal plus have been plus past participle. Again, let's take, for example, the last sentence. Ria may not have written the letter in the active form, changes to the letter may not have been written by Ria in the passive form. Students, please study this entire chart meditatively and keep studying this chart carefully. Practice well, and you shall not make mistakes in this topic. Now, please observe the following conversion of sentences I have compiled for you here. You have your interrogative, declarative, and imperative sentences converted from active to passive. The first one is an interrogative sentence which says, does the grocer sell rice? In active form, converts as, is the rice sold by the grocer? Look into the third one. A declarative sentence. My brother has written the letter changes to this letter has been written by my brother. The last three sentences are imperative sentences. Look at how they are converted. Do not close the windows. Let not the windows be closed. Please come on time. In active voice changes to you are requested to come on time in passive voice. I hope you remember your imperative sentences, the ones that have requests, commands, orders, etc. Please study the rest of the sentences. Students, your learning of passive voice is incomplete without understanding what transitive and intransitive verbs are. You see in this illustration on your screen, John kicks the ball. It is an active sentence, which will convert to the ball is kicked by John in passive voice. Now, the sentence has your subject, John. It has a verb, and it has a direct object to receive John's action of kicking. Please notice that when a sentence has a subject and an object to receive the subject's action, it is said to have a transitive verb, which is kick in this case. So, a transitive verb needs an object to give complete meaning, while intransitive verb does not need an object to give complete meaning. You see, as example, a sentence having a transitive verb, he sent a letter. You can convert it into passive voice. On the other hand, we have as example in intransitive verb, he laughs. There is no direct object to receive the action. Thus, this cannot be converted to passive voice. Some more examples of the transitive and intransitive verbs are listed out for you here. See, a few examples of sentences using intransitive verbs could be the audience laughed. Now, you cannot convert it into passive voice saying the jokes were laughed. It is absolutely incorrect, doesn't make sense. The kids smiled. Again, you cannot say the kids were smiled. More examples are she clapped, he died, we slept. All right. So now let's try and convert these sentences from active to passive. Students, please keep all the rules in mind and also see which ones can be changed and which ones can't be. All right. Take your time and convert these sentences. Let's check our answers. The first, third, and fourth are sentences with transitive verbs and have been changed to passive voice, as you can see for yourself, while the second and the fifth have intransitive verbs and thus they remain unchanged. Please check your answers from here. So, dear students, remember the two basic rules for converting sentences from active voice into passive voice, which are common for all tenses. The places of subject and object will be interchanged in the sentence. First. Second, only third form of the verb or past participle, for example, written or eaten or slept, will be used as a main verb in passive voice. And you shall never make mistakes in this topic. I hope you enjoyed learning voice and grammar. Thank you and have a good day.